Our beloved Mother Africa has the youngest population in the world, with more than 400 million young people aged between the ages of 15 to 35 years old, according to the African Union, and 70% of sub-Saharan Africa under the age of 30. Not only this, but the advancements in trade, the boom in innovation capacity, and even efforts across Africa prove that the possibilities of us becoming so much more looms large. But like anywhere else in the world, and with anyone else, if we're going to embrace this transformation, we must let go of outdated perspectives about who and what we are, or even what we can do as Africa and Africans, and then grab hold of new ways of seeing, doing, and being. The ReImagine Africa series, then, is made up of short, sharp conversations about unlearning who we no longer are and who we no longer choose to show up as Africans, so that we can become who our destiny calls us to be now. Today's episode, then, is one that is a personal favorite of mine and is titled First and Only Syndrome, and looks at the idea of staying and becoming the first and only, so that even when you become the first African in a room or the first African to accomplish something, we choose to sometimes keep it as the only by closing off the doors and not collaborating and building and growing that impact. It's an interesting conversation and one I'd love to hear your thoughts on afterwards. Enjoy this episode. The Unlearners. Learn, change. Learn, change. The Unlearners. The Unlearners. The Unlearners. Learn, change, grow. Sanbonani, hello everyone. Hi. It's lovely to have you on this episode of ReImagine Africa. Oh, it feels like it's been so long, but it's only literally just been like a week. But it's lovely to have all of you. Thank you so much for joining this episode and for watching this. It's lovely to have you. Today we are talking about something really juicy and controversial. So I have to be super careful how I position this one. And I would love to hear your thoughts on it. If you've been in this situation, if this has ever been you, or if you've ever encountered someone who has been in this situation. And then also, what are some of the best ways you think to go about this one? So before we get into what we're talking about today, I did want to say a very big thank you to everyone in the community. If you're not yet part of the YouTube community, please go over there and have a look at some of the great conversations we're having. One of them was talking about the best time to have our live. So we're going to do a live Q&A to celebrate hashtag 1,000 subscribers. Yay! So to celebrate that, we're going to do a live Q&A. We're going to talk all things change, all things transition, all things leveling up and shifting, transforming. I'm going to have a Q&A on that. And it looks like it's going to be the 12th so far, because those are the votes that are coming in. But if you think it should be the 11th, then let me know. Go over to the community and let me know. So that's that now out of the way. My face is burning. I think I'm smiling too much. Okay, anyway, so let's move on. Today we are talking about, I call it first and only syndrome. Now let me explain. Have you ever encountered someone who goes, and I've done this, I've had this, I've been in this situation before myself, that will go, oh, I'm the first African on the committee for the WNS or whatever association they're a part of, or I'm the youngest to be in whatever, and I'm the oldest member of the blah blah blah, or I'm the only person of color to be in the committee, or I'm the first African to be part of this elite association or elite organization, or to be on the board, and those types of things. Have you ever encountered that before? So that's what I call first and only syndrome. Now, let me explain a little bit here. So that happens basically when someone is the first, of some sort. Like I gave the examples, if you're the first person of color to be part of your sports team, or you're the first person of color to represent your country in a particular sport at the Olympics, or whatever it is, you're the first, or you're the only one, the only African who's part of this club, or the only African who has traveled here and here. And now, although that's okay, I mean, obviously there has to be a first, and if you are the first, sometimes you are the only, and that's okay. And that really shows progress, if anything. But my thing, and this is where the first and only syndrome comes in. The first and only syndrome is when you take that, being the first and being the only, and you take it and you wear it on your head so much that it becomes so ego-driven that you almost close the opportunity, or you don't take advantage of the privilege or the opportunity that you have to bring other people into that space who look like you, who come from where you come from. It's getting real. Let's have a conversation about first and only syndrome. Welcome to ReImagine Africa. Okay, so one of the things that come up when we talk about this first and only syndrome, and this is what I've named it, first and only syndrome, is that it is very heavily linked to this idea of lack and limitation, or lack and scarcity. If you go back to one of our first videos, and I'll put it up somewhere so that you can see it, and you can go back to one of the episodes that we did. It was around Africans and money. Africans and Money was the name of the episode, and we were talking about this idea of lack and limitation or scarcity, that there's just not enough to go around. Everybody has to scramble. I just have to keep my little bit and not share it because I don't know when I'm going to have again. All of those ideas stem from this mentality, or this consciousness of lack and limitation, that there's just not enough to go around. So I mustn't share. I must almost hoard everything that I have. And now if you look at that mentality and that idea, you'll see that there's a close link between that and this idea of first and only syndrome. So the people who are in these positions, let's say, for example, I'm the first 27-year-old or first young woman in her 20s of color to be part of a board for such and such company, or company X. I'm the very first young person, or youngest person, or person in their 20s of color to be a part of this board. Oh, I'm the first and possibly the only. So I take that, I'm proud of myself, which I should be, because I've done what I needed to do, and I've gotten in that position, and that's really great. Because I'm breaking paradigms, I'm changing stereotypes, I'm shifting the ceiling, whatever it is. And so I've done that, but then I might get into a position where I then fall victim of the first and only syndrome, when I would then say, oh, you know what, I'm the first and only, but I'm not opening up an opportunity, or I'm not mentoring or coaching or having conversations around the board table about bringing in the diversity of people who look like me, or people who come from where I come from, who can add the value that I'm adding. Because what happens a lot of the time when we're first and only is that think about it as if a person is slipping through. Have you watched those movies where the gates is closing, or like the garage door is closing, and someone literally has to run and slip through just before that door closes, or something like that? So that's practically, in my head, how I see it happens with first and only syndrome a lot of the time. Not all the time. Some people act very differently around this, and I think the more we can educate ourselves, the more we can also approach this differently. But what happens is that the person who is the first and only will slip through the garage door, and then they will let it close. They will let it close behind them, so that they remain the first and the only. And that, for me, is where the problem is. I think that as Africans, this is one of the things that have kept us stuck for a long time, because we've glorified being the first and only so much. And yes, you deserve your credit if you're first and only, we'll give you that. But we've glorified it so much that we don't create space for others who are like us, who are African, whatever that means. I'm not talking about people of color, I'm talking about Africans. and this is in Africa and in the diaspora, we don't open up opportunities and we don't have conversations in our little clubs where we're the first and only about getting more people from Africa or Africans into the conversation or around the table. And that's what happens. So there's this consistent lack and limitation that gets almost just repeated, and it's like the cycle. Even though you've got that one African on the board, there is just nothing representative of that diversity, or the person doesn't then make opportunities or doesn't play a role in increasing the number of Africans that come into the space, that influence decision making, that are a part of the bigger conversation. Because I think that when you are an African who's in a privileged position, you have the responsibility, and this is just me, this is my opinion, but I will stand for it, that you have the responsibility to get other Africans to have an opportunity similar to the one you have. I'm not saying, this is what often ends up happening, and not just with Africans, this happens across the board, is that we will sneakily, open up the gates and go, hey, I know you, so squeeze in. I'm not condoning that. I'm not saying let's open up the back door and get your father's, grandmother's, cat's, dog's uncle in a very almost underhanded way. What I'm saying is once we are first and only, let's create opportunities for other Africans to step up as well, for other Africans to be around the tables where decisions are made, and we don't hoard our opportunities. I know I'm coming across as very passionate today, but it's because I'm really passionate about this topic, and I think it's so important for us to have this conversation. So let me know in the comments, is this something you're familiar with? What have your experiences been around first and only syndrome? Have you been a victim? I've been a victim of first and only syndrome. That I think because we just glorify it so much, and you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm the only Black person in this area, or I'm the only African in this group, that you tend to want to keep it that way. And once you are in, it's your responsibility to ensure that other Africans have that same level of, access that you have. However you do that, there's so many different ways to do that. And we'll speak a little bit about that in the part about action. There's so many different ways to do that, or to break away from this first and only syndrome. Now, let's talk about the actionable stuff. What do we do? And we always start with awareness on the ReImagine Africa series. We always start off with awareness, because unless we are aware of what we're doing, what's happening around us, then we can't change it, right? So let's start there. Let's start with awareness. So 2 questions I want you to ask yourself around awareness. The first one is, in which areas am I the first and only? Now, with this one, you'll need to be super aware, or super specific when you look at it, and you really suss out the areas in your life where you're not necessarily the first and only, but you're still an anomaly. You're still a very rare find. You're still a minority. You're still not necessarily common, in that particular area. So there may be maybe 2 of you who are people of African descent on the board, or people of African descent in the company. It's your responsibility then to go, okay, I seem to fall into the category of first and only at my work, in my immediate team, in my workplace. Maybe I fall in there in my, in my Rotary Club. Whatever it is, think about the places in your life where you're involved, where you are, where you play a role, where you contribute, where you are doing some fantastic, amazing stuff, and contributing to the advancement of humanity in one way or another. So make a good list of those different places, and then ask yourself, in which areas am I first and only? And then make a list of those. And then that's how you'll start to raise that awareness, because sometimes we're not as aware as we think we are about that, because some of us have almost made it a habit, or it's almost a way of living, because we're just such a, what do they call it? Like one of those people that's super high performance, or just always wants to get things done, always wants to be right at the top. You're super driven, you're super ambitious. And so you do find yourself, especially if you're an African, you do find yourself in a position where you're first and only in so many spaces that it almost becomes something that you take for granted, that you don't see, that you just sort of run through, and there's no acknowledgement around it. So I want to challenge you, have a look at the different areas in your life and ask yourself, in which areas are you first and only? Cool. So next thing as part of awareness that I'd like you to ask yourself is, where is the potential to grow presence? Once you've got those different areas in your life where you are first and only, maybe definitely one of mine could be maybe spaces that I work in or clients that I've worked with. Maybe there's a particular client I've worked with and I'm the first Black woman or woman of African descent that they've ever booked for a facilitation, for a keynote. I'll go, okay, wow, that client has let me know that that's the case. In what ways can I have a conversation with the clients about that? So that's the second thing I really want you to do. Where is the presence for growth? Is there potential there? Is there potential in this conversation? Is the client looking to expand? In what ways are the metrics going to be positively affected if we bring in more people of African descent into this space? To be able to hold space for others is really, really important as we advance together as Africans, because unless those of us that are almost ahead in a way, don't open up that garage door that I was talking about a little bit earlier on, then everyone else has a lot less or a lot more of a hard time getting through, making an impact, being a part of decision-making processes, being part of the conversations. So those are two things for awareness that are really important. And awareness is usually made up of questioning, asking yourself the questions that matter, finding out, how you're involved, what you can do, and taking agency. Agency for me is super important because it's all about understanding the role that we can play. What can I do? Because as Africans, and I said this, I think in my previous video that was about the Black man, and I said that as Africans, a lot of the time, what we do tend to do, that I've seen at least, is that we pass off our power and we go, let's cross fingers. Hopefully the government is going to sort that out, and then I'll be sorted. I'll be okay once the government does something about it. And some things, yes, are government responsibilities that we are directly impacted by. But I do think that there is immense importance in us understanding the role that we play, taking back our own power and really standing our ground. I released a short video on my Instagram the other day. I was just doing it as a live in the morning. I felt super inspired. We had one of a really catastrophic, or maybe not catastrophic, but a really sad death that happened, or passing that happened in the country. So that South Africa was mourning just this fantastic individual by the name of Shauna Ferguson. And I just wanted to share I shared a short clip, and I was saying that life on earth is so short. It's so short, and a lot of people get into a position where they die with their stuff inside them. You leave this earth or this existence or this plane with your stuff still inside you. And Shauna was such a great example of someone who just lived fully. He did so many things, got involved in so many projects, and just lived a full life. And so I brought in this quote of live full, die empty. And I think it's so important as Africans that we understand that wherever we are, and obviously there are limits to this, sometimes resources may be one of the hindrances around this, but in whatever way you can, take agency of your own life, live full, so that by the time you pass over, or by the time your time is up, rather, let me use those words to be a little less brash about everything, but by the time your time is over, you want to be lying on your deathbed and go, at least I tried that thing. At least I spoke to that person. At least I did that thing. At least I went to that place. Because you just want to give yourself an experience. Life on earth is about really digging deep with your senses. Do what you can while you're here. And I think that was me on a little bit of a rant, but I thought that was really important that we share that a little bit. Okay, so now let's move on to action then. Action, we want action. What do we do when it comes to action around first and only syndrome? Now, one thing that I've said here, and I think that this ties back to what I said earlier on around action and doing something about it. This one is, if you're asked to recommend, do it. If you're asked to recommend, okay, I'm going to say it. I'm going to say it. Let's see what happens. If you're asked to recommend, do it. And keep in mind that you want to grow Africa, that you want to advance Africa. I'm not saying what we spoke about a little bit earlier on. I'm not saying that recommend someone purely on the basis that they are of African descent. What I am saying is that I think it's important for us, when we're asked to recommend or to advance someone or to promote someone it's important that we understand that there's a bigger narrative around changing the stereotype, changing the narrative around Africa. So as you recommend someone you know is a fabulous candidate. And there's definitely a plus if they are of African descent, because what that does is it opens up the garage door for us to bring more individuals to the table, for us to bring Africa to the fore, for us to bring Africa to the decision-making table. And once again, I'm going to say it, I'm not saying promote someone or recommend someone purely on the basis that they are of African descent, because we want competence. We do want competence. We want someone who is going to be able to serve in the best way possible. So make sure that distinction happens very clearly in our minds there. Okay. Second one. Oh, I love this one. This one is support other people with the insights and the skills to get there. Okay. I have a friend. Oh goodness, I have a few friends that I can think of now. Amazing South African women and women from other African countries, young, gorgeous. Some of them are individuals of color, and they are holding titles of being the first in Africa, first Black woman in Africa to be in that space, which for me is so profound. And so for this one, this part of action is support other people. What are you doing? Are you mentoring? Are you a mentor to a few young African girls, young African boys, because you want to groom them into this position or into this field or into, something similar to what you're working on? So are you mentoring? Are you coaching individuals to help them to get to where you are, instead of closing the garage door that we spoke about a little bit earlier on? And then the very last one is sponsorship. Now this sponsorship, I want to just explain it a little bit clearly. Is that sponsorship in a conventional sense, I think when we think sponsorship, we go money. But this sponsorship is a different sponsorship. This is the sponsorship of having a person. So if you are a sponsor, it means you are the person who mentions the person's name when they are not in the room. Remember that if you are first and only, the other people who are of African descent are not in the room with you because they haven't had the privilege or the opportunity or the honor or the luck or whatever you call it to be in that room yet. So as a sponsor, you are going to mention their name. So it's similar to that recommending. You're going to mention their name in their absence so that they almost come closer to being where you are, or to being in the spaces that will help them to also play a role in advancing the African narrative. And so these three are very important: mentorship, coaching, and then sponsorship. So all three of those are really important. And then sharing the insights. We'll speak a little bit about that when I talk to keep it up, the insights part. But I think that those three are really important: mentorship, coaching, and sponsorship. Those are the three things I think that are super important when it comes to action regarding things that you can do. If you feel a bit uncomfortable, because I know some people will say, oh, I feel so uncomfortable when I'm in the workplace recommending people that, maybe are not necessarily in a place where they can occupy a position, which is fine. It makes a lot of sense. If someone doesn't have, like I said, the capacity to be able to do it, then obviously you don't want to recommend them because they won't do justice to the position. But what I am saying is that these three things then, the sponsorship, the coaching, the mentorship, is one way that we can act so that we break down this first and only syndrome, so that we help other people to advance, we help other Africans to advance, so that they are equipped by the time those opportunities avail themselves, they can step up to the plate. Because often what happens with Africans is we sometimes might have an opportunity come up, maybe an opportunity given to our entire tribe or our entire community, and we can't take it up because we don't have the necessary insight, skills, knowledge base, connections, whatever it is, to occupy that role. And so as a first and only, you have a responsibility to mentor, coach, and sponsor so that people can get there. Cool. Now, let's go to the third and final one. And this one is all about keeping it up. How do we build those habits? How do we build those routines? What are some of the snappy little things that we can do on a daily basis that will help us? Cool. And for this one, it's very closely linked to what I said about the sharing the insights and the skills, the mentorship, coaching, and sponsorship. This one is literally in twofold, and it's all about being a connector or a maven. Let me explain. So this all comes from The Tipping Point. If you've ever read The Tipping Point, you'll know what this is about. If you haven't, please go ahead and read it. Really great book by Malcolm Gladwell. Very well-known influencer, thought leader, and just really all great individual and mind, if I can call it that. So he spoke about these two terms. Now there's more. There's a third one, but I want to just focus on these two. And what they are is they are ways to build networks. They are ways to expand the circle. Think about this as a way to, if you're sitting at a dinner table. So imagine you're sitting at a dinner table and there is just you at the dinner table. You and the other people that you work with, or the other people in this club or this board or this membership that we were talking about earlier on. What these two things will allow us to do is they will allow us to almost open up the table so that there's more of us able to sit at it. More Africans can occupy the conversation and be part of the narrative to help to not only drive Africa forward, but drive the world forward. Because remember, there's a big business case, a solid business case for diversity and inclusion. More especially for inclusion, not just diversity, because diversity on its own is not enough. There's a business case for inclusion. And so when we advance or we get more Africans to sit around the table, we're not just advancing Africa, but we're advancing the world. We're advancing business. We're advancing our economy. We're advancing so many other things, the consciousness of humanity and all sorts of other things. So see it at that level. Don't see it as, oh my goodness, but just Africans, what about everyone else? You know, there's so much more. There's so much more of a bigger picture happening here than just us, beautiful Mother Africa. Okay, so let me explain these two terms then. So being a connector, let me put that there. So being a connector is just being the person, and this one's so exciting for me. Have you ever met someone who, when you speak to them, they will go, when you tell them maybe what you do, they'll instantly go, oh, I know Tony. He does 1, 2, 3, 4. He works at a very similar place to you. I think that if you spoke to him, he would definitely be able to help you with that, and he can connect you to someone who can possibly invest in that business. That's a connector. A connector is the person you speak to, they've just met you, and then instantly they go, I know someone who might want to speak to you about that, or I know someone who might want to order that from you, or someone who might be able to fund that or connect you to this, or those people are connectors. And it's important that each and every one of us become a connector, especially to help break down this first and only syndrome. When you are a connector, as soon as you meet someone new, as soon as you establish a new relationship, you're always asking yourself, who do I know that would benefit from this person's services? And also, who do I know that this person can assist? So that every single time you meet a person, you're almost giving them two connections. One person that they can possibly help, and then one person who can definitely help them. That way you're being almost like a person who creates this web of networks for everyone else, so that people get the help that they need. People get the connections that they need. People get the juice out of life that they need and that will be super beneficial to them. So that's being a connector. And then the second one, sorry, my nose it's going to start getting a little bit pink. So the second one is a maven. And this one I really, really love too. And a maven is a giver or a sharer of information. This is the person who, when you meet them or when you tell them what you do, they'll go, have you read The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell? Or they will go, oh my goodness, have you heard that TED Talk by Chimamanda? Or, that's that person. They will just, share those things with you, share information, share insights, share blog posts, share articles based on hearing what you need. This is the person that shares information. And I love this one as well because it really goes against this idea of lack and limitation. But it says Africans are sharers. I mean, guys, if there's anyone out there who thinks that Africans are not sharers, you've got another thing coming. Because Africans have a communal culture where it's just all about sharing. When someone needs something in ancient African societies, we would share. There wasn't necessarily so much of an ownership, me, holding this to myself type of understanding, but there was just this, let's share everything. If you don't have today, don't go to sleep hungry, don't go to bed hungry. I'm going to give some of what I have. It was called uksisa in my in the isiZulu language. That's what it's still called. So you give just a little bit here, everyone have your bit so that we are all taken care of. And that really is what these beautiful ideas of being a connector and a maven are all about. It's all about sharing. The networks we know will help to drive a person forward in their goals. And someone else remember, someone is always looking for what other people are doing. So connecting them to someone who needs what they are doing. And then being a maven is all about information, sharing information. I think someone is here. Let's pause. All right, I'm back. We have someone at the gate to drop something off. Okay, so wow, what an episode it's been. That's where we're going to wrap it up with exactly that it's important for us to understand that through the actions we do each and every single day, those are the things that count. That's how we become individuals who are advancing Africa and who are changing the narrative. Remember, it's hardest for those of us who are going to almost swim against the tide to change the direction of things. So it seems the hardest. But remember that those who come after us are going to reap the rewards of the work that we've done. And that's what matters. It feels heavy and overwhelming, but it's worth it. It's well worth it because we are going to be the reason that things change. It's all about what we do. That's the only thing. It's about what we do today. That's what makes the biggest difference. So I love you guys as always. Please let me know in the comments if you have any thoughts around this. It's been so lovely chatting to you. I look forward to chatting to you during our live this coming week, actually. Looking forward to some great conversations. I've just got so many of you now whose names have, I keep seeing your names. My face is burning again because I'm smiling too much. But when I see your names come up in the comments, I just always smile to myself because I've come to know so many of you. So I hope you're all going to be present for the live coming up on Thursday. It looks like it'll be, might be Friday, depending on the votes in the community. So let me know in the community what your thoughts are. Otherwise, thank you so much. I look forward to our next episode of ReImagine Africa. Remember to be someone who plays a role in changing the narrative. Not only if you are someone who is going through or moving through or trying to unlearn this first and only syndrome, but just as an African. No, it really is about what we do today. That's what makes all of the difference. I love you lots, guys. Looking forward to reading your comments and your thoughts on today's subject or today's topic, which is, like I said just now, all about unlearning the first and only syndrome and relearning, becoming connectors and mavens. Love you lots and lots. Mwah, mwah, mwah. The unlearners. Learn, change, grow. Learn, change, grow. The unlearners. The unlearners. The unlearners. Learn, change, grow.